I am going to show you how to make the Aurora Bag by Obi. And we'll get started. So the first thing you need are your pattern pieces and your pattern. Cut all that out and get that ready. Then you need your exterior. I'm going to use this black vinyl by Shack's Crafts. It's really nice, it has a really nice feel to it. I'm going to use this waterproof canvas for my lining. For my interfacing, I'm going to use Peltex. It's has a good shape to it. It's pretty firm. And so I think it gives the kind of shaping that we want for this particular bag. Some other things that you'll need: some scissors, you might need a mallet for your grommets, hole punch, a rivet press, and I'm going to be using double-sided tape. I'm going to be using glue. I use this Beacon Advanced Craft Glue. You just need something that's going to hold the pieces together while you're working on it. For hardware, you want a turn lock. My turn lock pieces, I always use scrap Peltex on the back of it. I'm actually going to be making a strap for it instead of using a chain this time. So I have my strap pieces, the handle attachments, and the D-rings. Put all that back in here. You're also going to need some rivets. So I got my rivets here and some grommets, and I'm just going to use these silver grommets. So once you have all of your stuff together, then you can go ahead and start cutting out your pattern pieces. I'm not going to do that real time. That would take too long, so I'm going to go ahead and do a time lapse of that, but you'll see me going through and cutting out all the pieces. Okay, now that we have everything cut out and ready to go, we're going to start working on putting the interfaces onto the pieces. So we're going to start with the front flap and the back flap. So I'm going to pull those pieces out, and then I'm going to set everything else aside right now. There we go. And so you should have one front flap, one back flap interfacing, but you should have two pieces of back flap and two pieces of front flap cut out of your exterior. So I will start with the front flap, and for this, you can use glue or double-sided tape to hold it in place. I will use glue on this one. So I am just going to do this real quick. Again, I'm using this Beacon Craft Glue, and then I just use this little handy tool, and it just spreads it out so I don't get those glue bumps through the vinyl. Okay. Then I eyeball the center. You can certainly measure the center to make sure that you're getting it perfectly, but I don't like to do that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and eyeball it and put that on there. I'm gonna put my grommets on here for a weight just to hold it in place for right now. So while that is drying, we'll move on to this one. And I will do double-sided tape on this one so that you can see it works both ways. If you have a press and can press these on, that's great. It does have the glue on it, but I don't have a press, and even if I did, I don't know that I would use it because I'm always scared of ruining my vinyl. And so I tend to just add extra glue or double-sided tape or whatever the case may be. So again, I'm just going to eyeball the center here the best I can. There we go. All right. Then for here, I like to go around and make small snips, maybe 1/8 of an inch, a little bit larger than 1/8 of an inch, just so that when you're folding it down, it's not pulling and causing tension. You want the exterior to be able to open up a little bit. You'll see what I mean when we're folding it down. But I just do it along that curved edge. Then I'm going to go ahead and put this right along the interfacing on the edge. So I'm going on the exterior right next to that interfacing, not on the interfacing, but right next to it. This is the 1/8 inch double-sided tape. You can use glue if you want. You don't have to use anything if you're confident that way. But this is just going to give me that little extra hold that I want when I'm folding it. So keep going all the way around here. Oh. Of course, my double-sided tape is being a little sticky. So we'll do this. And last side. There we go. Okay. And then I like to just kind of run my fingernail along, make sure that's all pressed down nice and flat. Okay. So that's done. I start on the long edge. Go ahead and peel off that backing. And we're going to fold the outside to the interfacing, not over, to. So we're going right to that tape that we set down, and we're pinching it into place. Just like this. It does help if you have a roller to kind of smooth out that seam. But we're going to the interfacing. Okay. I like to put a clip just at the corners until I have everything snipped perfectly. And then I can go from there, but I'm gonna do this to the interfacing, not over. We're going to the interfacing. We're going to do this all the way around. At these corners, I start from the center again, and you'll see you'll get these little pieces that stick up. You just kind of want to pinch them together and then snip them flush. And it gives you this nice corner, nice crisp corner. So then I put a clip there. And we're gonna do the same thing here. Pinch it together and clip it flush. And clip it. And then you have those really nice crisp corners that really give the design its appearance. So we're going to go around and do that for each corner. Okay, and then here, take off the paper backing. Doesn't want to give it up. There we go. Start from the center here. Remember, we made all those marks, all those clips in, and you're going to see it's already wanting to open up a little bit. And that's because we're on a curve. So if that didn't have the ability to open up, it would be pulling really hard. And it would be hard for you to get all the way over with a smooth line. So, but you want to make sure that your clips aren't so deep that they're going to be in your fold mark or showing up on the front. And then you just keep going all the way through. Again, a roller really helps here to get that flat. And we're going to do the corners the same way. So you come all the way up and pinch. And clip. Like this. And down. All right, so there we have our interfaced back panel. And again, I can't stress that enough. It's going to the interfacing, not over it. And I'm just going to clean up my mess before I move on to the next piece. Okay. Now I'm going to take the uninterfaced piece, and I don't like raw edges. So I'm going to show you how I do this without raw edges. You can see here that it's folded over about 1/4 of an inch. That's your seam allowance. So I'm going to make a mark at 1/2 inch, 1/2 of an inch, and I'm going to do that all the way around. I work with the straight edges first. And then I come here for this. I just kind of work my way around. And you can see there, it gives you that nice line as long as you're working your way around. And that will be our guide for folding this one, because that would be where your interfacing would be. So again, I'm going to put this just above that mark as if the interfacing was there. Will not be on the interfacing, it will be right above it. And we're going to do this same thing that we just did on the first one. Tape all the way around. We're going to make snips in that curve so that it can sit nice and flat, and clip the corners so those are nice and flat, and fold it all in, and then we're going to put those pieces together. Okay, again, I'm just gonna run my nail down, make sure everything's nice and flat. Okay, I like to start on the flat edge, and we're pulling it over to that line that we made. I know it may not be the easiest to see on mine right now, but I can see it, so as long as you can see your mark, that's all that matters. But we're folding it to that line. I just roll it a bit to get that nice flat edge. Again, I'm clipping to hold it until I get those corners done. I'll do my next long edge here. Okay. You're going to work those corners the same way. Pinch them both up to the line. Give it a good pinch there, and then clip it flush. Gives you that nice corner. And we're just going to do those little clips. They don't have to be a lot. They don't have to be really close together. You just need to have that little bit of flexibility when you're folding. Start in the center. Work your way to that corner. Pinch and fold and clip. Okay. All right, so then we have our non-interface piece all folded and clipped. Then we are going to bring these two pieces together. They should line up nicely. I, again, always really start on this flat bottom because then I can make adjustments if I need to. So there's a corner, just lining it up. And you can see here that this side is sticking out a little bit. That's the beauty of this. If it's sticking out a little bit, you can always adjust it. So I'm just going to bring this side in a touch more so that it fits. And you can see there that that will fit nicely. So I'm just going to clean up that corner. Perfect. All right, and then we'll come to this corner, and that corner fits perfect. This corner, perfect. All right, just keep working our way up. You can see here, this gets a little bit off. Again, no problem, because we can just fold it over a little bit more to make it fit. And that will fit perfectly. So clean up this corner here. Okay. And just clip along the curve. And this piece is ready to go. So we're going to set this aside because we're going to move on to the front flap now. It's had a chance to sit. And we're essentially going to do the same thing. Just make sure that that's adhered enough. But we are going to put the tape next to the interfacing, not on the interfacing, and go around. Now you'll see that some of my sections here look a little bit bigger than others. I did not measure when I put this in the center. So if you want to measure, you will avoid these kind of uneven spots. But as you saw with the back flap, it's very easy to correct that when you're going through. Now for this one, I'm going to start at the top because this is a more curved all around the edges. And so I'm going to start here by making those small snips into the seam, into the edge, I mean. They don't have to be deep, they don't have to be close. Just something to allow it to spread out as you're folding it. And you're going to fold it over to the interfacing, not over, to the interfacing. Okay, then I'll come down the side to the interfacing. We'll work that corner since it's right here. Squeeze it together, clip it flush, give you that nice corner. Here you can see it's a little bit small, but that's still okay. You do need to clip into this corner a little bit. Again, you don't want to go deep, but we do need to be able to overlap these clips a little bit. So I'm going to start by overlapping them to get a nice curve on that corner to come all the way around. Okay, so you see that nice curve, and you can see they're overlapped a bit. Let me see if I can get that closer for you to see. You can see they're overlapped a little bit, and it gives you that really nice curve to the piece. Now, and again, through here, it's a curve. It's not a big one, but it does need these little clips to help avoid the bunches. And then we just fold it to the interfacing all along. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to put a clip here to hold it in place because I want to work down to that corner again. I like my overlaps to be going in the same direction. So this one I overlap going this way. I'm going to overlap going this way. Pinch that corner. Clip it flush. Okay. And then we're going to do those teeny tiny clips again. And then we just start here and we start that overlapping process to really make sure you get that nice curve. Give it a little roll. You can see again, nice curve on that overlapped corner. And then I'm just going to use some clips to hold it in place until we can clip them together. Set that aside. And we're going to do the same thing that we did for the back panel. I'm going to go around this and mark 1/2 inches. So just making little movements with my ruler and big lines to get that curve just right. Then come down the side, come down this side. And I like to start on the longer edges on the bottom. And again, around curves. And then you can just work on making that a nice curve here. I like to make a lot of little lines because this curve is a little bit bigger. Go here, here. And then, perfect. Okay. And then again, we're going to go just outside that line because that would be our interfacing guide. All the way down and around. And again, you can use glue. If you're comfortable just clipping to hold, that's fine. I just like to work quick, and I have found that this seems to be the most efficient way for me to hold these pieces while I'm working with them, and then I sew them. But I do tend to do all of this before I sit at the machine. I don't like to go back and forth a lot, so if you're like me, this will be helpful. Make those little snips along the edge, not deep. So we can fold that down. Fold it down to the line you drew. These tiny little clips around the corner. Okay. And once you've made this bag once, you'll find that it's actually not challenging at all. It's just kind of a lot of prep work up front, but once you get this done, it goes together really quickly, and it makes a really nice looking, sleek bag. So I'm very excited for Obi to go ahead and release this pattern because this is a really cool way of putting this together. All right, you can see I got my overlapping. Clip it to hold it. Just keep working my way around. You'll notice I didn't put clips in this bottom this time. It is ideal to do that, but it is such a smooth curve here that it's not as big of an issue as it would be for these corners. You really can't get away with making a smooth corner if you don't have these clips in. Clip it flush. And then we just start our overlap process. Okay. All right, so now we have this ready. We can again line it up with this top panel. I like to start on the bottom so I can get these corners clipped together. And then always work your way around. Don't try to clip one corner, go over and clip the other, and then come across. Because if there is any discrepancy in the folding, you want to be able to fix that as you go, not have a big lump. And this one is good enough for me. So you can see that lines all the way across. That's really nice. And we're gonna come over here. Perfect. See, this one just sticks out a touch. Not a problem, because we can adjust it just a touch. Bring this corner down. Oops, sorry. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so you can see that is all clipped and ready. So that is just what we wanted. And I'm just gonna go make sure that none of my snips are hanging out where they can be seen. These corners are really nice and lined up evenly. Okay. Now we're gonna grab our main panels. Again, I do all of my interfacing as much as I can before I go sit down at the sewing machine. So I'm following the directions, but in a little bit of a different order, just because I don't want to have to sit down at the sewing machine, get back up, sit down at the sewing machine, get back up. All right, so I'm going to glue this one. Like this. Again, I'm going to eyeball it. It does help that I have that center line on there, so at least I know I'm centering it properly that way. Give it a good press. I'm going to move these over and just set some weight on that. Set clip bin and grommets on there to hold it in place. This one, I'm going to do the same thing. You can use double-sided tape. You can just put it down and clip it. Whatever works for you. Again, I have those center lines to help me line it up that way, and just put that there. Okay. I'm going to set this on that just to get that little weight on it while it's drying. This should be good enough for now. And we're going to do the exact same thing again. We're going to take the double-sided tape and put it right next to the interfacing, not on it, next to it. Go all the way around. Okay. And again, we're folding it over to the interfacing, not over it, right to that tape. And by the time you're done with this, you're gonna be a pro at putting these corners together. You can make snips in this one. Again, this is kind of a gradual curve, so it's not a big deal if you don't want to. Just make sure you get it nice and smooth. Do the same thing with these corners, put them together, pinch them good, and clip them flat. Okay, set that aside. Grab our other piece. And same thing. Tape it next to the interfacing, not on the interfacing, all the way around. Fold it up to that interfacing, flipping it to the tape. All right, so we have our main panels done as well. Now I'm going to come over here. These are our D-ring connectors. I drew a line down the center of them. I'm just going to fold it into the line. You can use double-sided tape, you can use glue if you'd like. It's a small enough piece for me that I don't feel it necessary, so I just fold it to the center line and clip it to hold it, and put that in my sew pile. I'm going to do that for both pieces. And then I'm going to take my handle piece, and again, this is a 4-inch piece. I have a line drawn down the center at 2 inches. I am going to fold these pieces in, use a clip to kind of help hold it to that center line. You want to go just next to the center line, not on it, because you do want to give room to fold it in half again. Bring that other side over. Again, you can see I'm leaving that tiny little sliver of a space just so that there is room when you're folding it back onto itself, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So we have that folded in, and we're going to take those raw edges and fold them again like this to get your handle, and then we're just going to clip it together, making sure everything is nice and smooth and sitting evenly. We don't want it to be twisting. Okay, so that's ready. And then the last thing we're going to do is take our frames and our gusset. Here's where I kind of change things up a little bit. I do not interface these yet. I want to have no raw edges. So I am going to sew my frames to the gusset before I add my interfacing. Now, if you're using a lighter interfacing, go ahead and adhere it. Because I'm using the Peltex, I really want this to be a nice structured bag. I can show you what I mean. Here is one that I had done before, and you can see that it's really nice and structured. This doesn't have a lot of give, and so it doesn't squish or anything. That gusset really holds it in place. I like that kind of a structure for this particular bag, so I'm going to use the Peltex as well. And so that is why I'm going to change things up a little bit. But again, if you have a lighter interfacing, go ahead and apply it now. You want to start with your gusset face up, right side up, and take one of your frames. You're going to put your frame right side down. You want to make sure that you have your gusset centers marked. I'm just going to make a little clip. And same thing with your frame. If this is a material, if you're using a material that when you bend it is going to leave marks, I would not suggest bending it. I would suggest using some sort of a marking utensil, but this does not leave the marks, so I'm good with this. Now you want to line up the inside of your frame. We're going to be putting the inside of the frame to the gusset. So I'm going to start by just lining up these centers and clipping. I'm going to clip right along till I get to these corners. At these corners, I'm going to make a very small little snip straight into the corner. Very small, maybe an eighth of an inch, just so that I have that ability to pull it straight, because you can't do that when it's not cut. So again, come to this other side, snip it, eighth of an inch straight into that corner. Okay, then we're going to make it straight like I just showed you and follow it up the rest of the way. So here I have my frame straightened. You can see that triangle where that snip was, and then I'm just going to continue clipping it along the gusset like this. Do the same thing on the other side. We want to straighten that out, make it a straight line to sew, clip it in place, and follow the rest of the gusset. Now again, I like to do things as much as I can before I sit down at my sewing machine, so I'm actually going to flip this around and do it to the other side as well. But if you are more comfortable taking this to your sewing machine and sewing it to hold it in place and then going back, do that as well. Do what works best for you. You're going to line the inside of the frame up with the gusset, centers to centers. Clip along till you get to that corner again. Do that tiny little snip, just a little snip, to allow you to straighten it out. Then continue clipping to the gusset. Same thing on this side, tiny little snip. Pull it straight and continue clipping. Okay, now I have all of my pieces ready to go. I'm going to take my two flaps, my front flap and my back flap, my D-ring connectors, my handle, and my gusset with the frames, and I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to leave this here for now. We don't need these pieces, and once I'm done sewing, I will attach these before I do the top stitching. So I'm going to leave this here as well, and we will come back to that. Okay, now I'm at my machine. I'm going to start with the easy things first. I'm just going to sew down both sides of these, well, all four sides of these D-ring connectors with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm just top stitching, so I have it at a 4 length. I am using a thread that is contrasting so that hopefully you guys can see how and where I'm sewing a bit better. You can see it's nicely top stitched down both sides. I'm gonna do the same thing for the handle. 1/8 inch seam allowance, top stitching all four sides. So my handle is done and my D-rings are done. So I'm going to set them aside. Next, I'm going to grab the back flap And I like to start on the bottom. I'm going to leave long threads so I can pull it through the seam. And again, you're just going to go around and top stitch with 1/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. I'm going to leave long thread tails on that side as well. So then I'm just going to go to the reverse side. I'm going to pull these tails a little bit till I can see that front thread. I'm going to pull that thread to the back. I'm going to do that for both pieces. Then I'm going to tie this like this. This, and I'm actually just going to snip this close because this is going to have a piece sewn to it, so it's not going to be as noticeable, and then I'm just going to burn those to keep them together. Okay, and you can't even see, and our back flap panel is done. We're going to do the same thing to the front panel now. I'm going to start at the top edge, leaving my thread tails long, top stitching at 1/8 inch seam allowance. You want to kind of sew smooth, slow and smooth. You really want to get the nice curve with your stitching. I think this is a really good bag to work on the nice top stitching lines. And kind of master these corners. Again, just go slow. And leave those thread tails long, flip it to the back. We're going to pull those thread tails back through just like we did for the back flap. It doesn't want to come through. Well, and I'm going to tie it. Make sure I get that little one in there as well. Okay, and then I'm going to pull that knot down close. I'm going to trim it and burn it. Now usually I would pull it through the seams, but again, this piece, this top edge will be sewn, and so that won't be seen. Okay, and now our top panel is done. So we have our back panel and our top. Now we're going to take our gusset and the frames. This is going to go to a stitching length. I've moved it down to 3 because I'm using a thicker vinyl. And I'm going to sew these together with 1/4 inch seam allowance. You want to make sure you backstitch at the front, at the start and the end. And just go slow when you get to that snipped area, because you want to make sure that you're not sewing a fold into the frame. So keep it nice and flat. You can see it's kind of a little triangle here. Keep it nice and flat and just go slow. Again, I'm going to get this nice and flat, and I'm going to just sew slowly. Okay, past that area, and we can finish. You can see here, it's a nice straight line straight across, and if I pull this out, there is no fold. Okay, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Back stitch at the start and stop, and you're going to use 1/4 inch seam allowance. Push this down, go slow. Okay, again, push this down and go slow. So you can see I sewed straight across by pushing it down. When you pull it out, there are no folds sewn into the frame. Okay, now we are going to take this back over, and I'm going to attach the interfacing and then do my top stitching. Okay, so we're back here. We've got our interfacing, and we're going to put the interfacing in and then do our top stitching. I like to start with the gusset. I am going to add glue. You can use double-sided tape, whatever works for you. Again, it is just to hold it in place while we're working. Flip this around. Then you want to line this up. It should go pretty evenly in between your stitch lines. Like this. And like this. We can always trim any that doesn't fit. Turn it around. I want to make sure it's laying nice and flat. Okay. Perfect. And we're going to do our frame. Okay. Now remember, it's going this way, and we want to line that up with the edge of the stitch line. Okay, it can be a little bit funny through here because we have that curve. That part doesn't really concern me right now. It's just getting the majority of it into place. And snip it. There we go. I'm just going to use a clip to hold around these corners. Just like that. Okay, so I'm just going to do one side at a time so I can show you. It can get a little bit tricky with the more thicker interfacing. Thinner interfacing, you won't have as much of a problem. It won't be quite as bulky, but I'm going to show you how I do this again because I like this thicker framing to really give it that stiffness. So we want to fold this, the seam here, to the bottom. So I'm going to flatten this out and I'm going to fold it to the bottom. You can see it's folding right over the interfacing on the bottom. That is what we want. The stitch line is going to catch some of that and hold it in place so it doesn't shift around. But you do need to make sure that you catch some of it. It's okay if it doesn't catch all of it, but it does need to catch some of it. Now you can see here that my interfacing is actually a little bit over that line, and that is not a problem. I just didn't cut it perfectly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut that little bit off. And I think that's the beauty of this pattern, is how incredibly flexible it is. Nothing has to be perfect for it to still come out as a beautiful bag that looks like you spent a ton of time making, or that was professionally made. So I'm just gonna hold these in place with this because this framing, again, this framing can get a little bit tricky because it's wanting to go in all sorts of directions. And I don't want it to, so I'm just holding it in place with these clips to prevent it from really going crazy on me. I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch on my bottom to hold that bottom interfacing into place. Okay, we're back and I am going to top stitch this bottom. And so it's really important as you go to make sure that you're keeping that seam folded over the bottom. I'm going to use a 4 stitch length on my machine, and I'm going to back stitch just a little at the beginning. And then I'm going to use that 1/8 inch top stitch. Go slow, just pulling it over, making sure you're stitching that seam down. Okay, these corners can be a little tricky, but again, you're just going to flatten them out the best that you can and make sure that seam is folded over and stitched down. And I just back stitched a little bit at the end there to make sure that my stitches are going to hold. And then you can see that the seam is flipped over and it is holding that interfacing into place on the gusset, and that is what we want. Okay, now I'm going to take this back over to the table. I'm going to add my other framing panel and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, back at the table. So I'm going to flip this over. We're going to add our last framing on this side. And then we're going to top stitch that last bottom seam over, and then we'll move to the next step. I'm just going to glue it. We remember that the frame is going this way. We're lining it right up with that stitch line. So use some clips to hold it in place. Down and around. Okay. And then because I'm actually going to be top stitching this seam, I will put these clips on this side to hold the frame when I am taking the clips off of the seam I'm sewing. Okay, and back to the sewing machine to top stitch that last bottom seam. All right, back at the sewing machine, and we are going to pull these clips off of the seam, roll it over, and we want to make sure that we are catching that interfacing with the seam as we sew. So we're going to flip this over. We're sewing on the bottom, back stitch at the start. Go slow. Really make sure that you've got that seam folded over top of the interfacing on the bottom. You get to these corners, just flatten them out best you can and stitch down. And I didn't check beforehand, but my interfacing is folded a bit, so I'm just going to trim that down so it is not being folded, which is a little bit tricky to do on the sewing machine itself, so I would definitely recommend folding it at your table before you sit down to make sure that it's not going to be folded. Okay, and you can see here, both seams are folded towards the bottom and they are holding that bottom interfacing into place. Okay, go back to the sewing table for the next part. All right, so here you can actually see, if you bend it right at those corners, you can see that the bag is taking shape. You've got your frames here that are looking really nicely. If you can see that nice. So everything is looking really good here. The next thing that we're going to do is folding this frame down onto itself. Now this frame is different than all of the other folding edges that we did because we are actually going to be folding it right over the interfacing this time. So I am going to use my double-sided tape. I'm going to use the 1/8 inch, and I'm going to do it right along the edge, the outside edge, because that is the best way I can ensure it's going to have as minimal chance of getting under my sewing needle as possible. And it can be a little tricky doing this. Just go slow, do it in chunks. You want to do each side on its own. So there's one, and we're going to come through, and you can see the framework just does not want to stay for me. That's okay. This way. right on the outside. All the way down. Okay. We'll come to this side and we're going to clip this frame in place so it's not being crazy. You can see I have a little notch because I put my pattern piece too close to another pattern when I was cutting it, but that's okay because we are going to be folding that edge over so it won't be seen. Okay. All right, so now we've got that done. And we're going to do something very similar to what we were doing with the other panels, except this time we're folding over the interfacing. You want to fold it all the way over. So right where that interfacing line is, you want to fold that up and over. So this interfacing will be in the seam allowance. So you need to keep that in mind. If you have a machine that can't handle any sort of thicknesses, I am working on a domestic machine, but it is a heavy duty domestic. And there's very little that I have not been able to sew through. So this is not a problem for me. But if you have a machine that can't handle it, make sure that you're using a thinner interfacing for this particular area. And you're just gonna fold it over. When you get to the corner, you're gonna do the same things before. You're gonna pinch it, clip it flush, just like that. Okay, and then we're gonna do this side. All the way over. And that interfacing should really be lined up with your seam. Get to the corner, and you're going to do the same thing, pinch it together, clip it flush. Okay. There we go. And I'm just going to stick some clips on here just to make sure that it's holding while I do the same thing on the other side. But you can see that we have that nice folded edge. There will be no raw edges on this at all. We're just going to flip this to the other side. I'm going to grab some more clips. I'm starting to run low. Okay. And I'm going to take the double-sided tape again and right along that outer edge. So this is a little bit different than the other ones. Again, we are going along the outer edge, not the interfacing. Go all the way across. Like that. I like to press it as I go on these just because you're working with a little bit trickier of an area. Coming this way. And the last side. Starting on the bottom, we're going to fold it over the interfacing. Over the interfacing. Make sure that your frame stays lined up to the stitch line and fold over the interfacing. This side over the interfacing. Once you get to this corner, you just want to do the same thing. You're going to pinch it, flip it flush, last corner, pinch it, flush, and close. Okay, so this is done. Again, I'm just going to hold these edges with a few more clips until we're ready to sew this. And then I'm just going to set this aside while we move on to the next part. We will need our panel. This is going to be our back panel. And we are going to take our back flap piece and we are going to measure on this back panel down 2.5 inches. And I like to make a mark, and I'm going to make it at 2 3/8 so that it's covered by the stitch line. And then I put my back panel on, and you want to center it. Make sure it's nice and centered. Okay. And then I'm going to clip it on the sides here. You can use double-sided tape to hold it. You can use a little bit of glue, but I just do that. So I mark it. It's just over the mark, I know, by about 1/8 of an inch. So it's at 2.5. And we're going to go and we're going to stitch this. We're going to come up just a stitch or two, come back across, and then come back down a stitch or two. So you have a little bit of a rectangle here that's really going to hold this in place. So let's go ahead and go do that. All right, so we're back at the sewing machine. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to use long threads, leave long threads at the start. And I'm going to put my needle up a little, come back, and I'm going to stitch right along that same stitch line that I used for the back flap. I'm top stitching. I have it at 4 length. come up just a stitch or two, flip it, and then I'm going to do another line across. Flip it and bring it back down. And end with the long tails again. I'm going to bring those stitches to the back. There's one. And there's the other. So knot those like this. Snip, and I leave a little bit of a tail there. This is on the back. Nobody's ever going to see this part unless they rip the bag apart. So I just leave that. And I take these clips that are holding it in place off, and we are going to take the front flap, and with this side, wrong side up, we're going to put the flap, the front flap, right side up. So the wrong sides together with the back flap and the right flap, or front flap, and we're going to clip it right along that edge. Make sure that they are nice and even or centered, and we are going to stitch across that. And again, we're going to stitch another line just to secure it. Let me double check that actually. I think we might only need to stitch one line. Clip the front panel, remember place the curved part on top. So we're just going to do one line because the grommets will actually hold them together better. So we're just going to do one line of stitching across that. I'm actually going to follow the same line that I did my top stitching with. And there you have it. I'm going to pull these threads to the back. And knot them. Okay, and then I will pull these through the seams at my sewing table, and we are going to move over to the sewing table to add the D-rings. All right, back at the sewing table again. So you can see there's a lot of back and forth, but if you do all that work in the beginning, it's much more minimal. I am going to take my self-threading needle. I'm going to stick it through this top part, come out in the middle. I'm going to thread my thread and pull it through to hide that knot. Pull it, do it on both sides. Push this through to the center, bring it out at the center. like so. Thread it. There it goes. Pull it. And then I'm going to snip it as close as I can inside the seam. There we go. So you can't really see where I started and stopped. All right. Now we're going to take our framing panel again, and we're going to come here and measure down 2 inches and centered, and we want to make a mark that is, well, I have 1 inch D-rings. If you have 3/4 of an inch D-rings, then you'll want 3/4 of an inch mark, but mine are 1 inch, so I'm going to do 1 inch mark centered and 2 inches down from the short edge of the gusset. So you see my mark. I'm going to do that on both sides. 2 inches down and centered. Okay. And then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut across just within that mark. You're going to need your D-rings. So here you're going to take this, you're going to put it right side up through the wrong side, like so. Pull it out. I like to leave a little less than 1 inch, maybe 1 inch on the inside. Flip it around. Put your D-ring on. I have the wrong D-rings because I made 2 inch ones. So sorry about that. Put your D-ring on with the flat end pointing at the cut. And then you're going to take this and feed it back through that hole. This can be a little bit tricky, especially if you use the thicker interfacing like I have. But you're going to feed it back through that hole. There it goes. And then you're just going to pull it until that D-ring is sitting with a nice blanket, is how I like to think of it. So there's a nice blanket holding that D-ring in place. Then you want to make sure these are pointing down, and you're going to want to catch both with the rivet. So I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to mark 1/2 inch from that fold and centered. 1/2 inch from that fold. All right, we're going to do 3/8 of an inch from that fold and centered, just to make sure I get that bottom piece. There it is. And then we're going to punch a hole and add a rivet. So get your hole punch, get your rivet press, and your rivets. rivet in, make sure that it's going through both pieces. And press the rivet. Okay, just like that. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing on this other side. We're gonna come over here where we made that mark. We're going to make our cut. I like to make it just shy of that full 1 inch mark so it's snug. Put across. Put our D-ring in. Again, we're going right side up when we insert it from the wrong side. You can see it's snug, very snug, and I want that. I want it to be snug. Pull it through, leave a thumb worth. Flip it, add your D-ring, and then push it back through that slit again. All right, make sure it's got a nice blanket, if you will, that it's sitting nicely, just like that. We're gonna do the same thing, make a mark 3/8 of an inch down and centered. Punch a hole. Add your rivet. Making sure it's going through both pieces. Okay. And then press. And then we have our D-rings complete. Remove this. Okay, move this and this. Actually, I am going to add rivets. In the corner here, I like just a little bit of extra security because the people who use my bags tend to use them a lot, and I want to make sure that nothing is going to happen when they are pulling or opening or closing. So I'm just going to add it right in between my stitch lines, right in the corner. So I'm not clipping any stitches, but I am putting it right in that corner. Two rivets. And we're going through the back flap, through the back panel, but make sure that your front panel is out of the way. You do not want to rivet your front panel on accident here. That would be a very bad thing. Okay, so we have that on. We're going to go ahead and press those in place. And that is just going to provide a little bit of extra support for this back flap placement. Okay. All right. Now we are going to take our gusset and our panel, and we are going to line them up right sides together. Well, wrong sides together, along this lower edge first. So it's very important to work from the center. So you can see my center marks. I'm going to go ahead and line up the center and work from the center out. If anything needs to be adjusted, we're going to be doing it on the edges. But you can see here that it really lines up pretty nicely. As you go. Come to this side. You just want to go all the way up the main panel and have to move that flap a little bit out of your way as you work your way up. And you can see that my gusset panel is a little bit shorter than my frame panels. That's okay. You can make your gusset a little bit longer. I think Obi may be adjusting the pattern so that it is a little bit longer so you don't have that difference. But we're going to be folding this down, and as long as we fold it even at that point, it's really okay to have that little bit of extra. It's not a problem at all. But right now we're going to clip, and it should clip and match up with the top of the frame. We're going to clip it along both sides all the way to the top. Okay. All right, so here I like to fold back my back panel so it can kind of be trained on where it's going to be folding when the bag itself is being opened. So right along that stitch line, I just fold it back a little bit so that Peltex has that fold in place. That way I can work without worrying about my flap getting in the way. Okay, and you can see it doesn't quite match up, but again, that is okay. I am going to cut my interfacing on the frame out of the way. I don't want this extra interfacing in the way. It doesn't need it all the way up here, so I'm just trimming it away to what I need. So just a little bit. Okay. I'm gonna do that on all four sides. Just trimming the interfacing down. Try not to clip your bag. I almost just clipped through the exterior. That would have been awful. There we go. All right. So from this point, we want to fold down these edges to match up with the back. So unclip that first clip so you have a little bit of room to work with. You can see here I have a little bit of room. We're going to open this seam up and fold it down so that it matches up with the height of the back. Okay, that's going to be good. So then you want to make sure that you clip that corner seam again and line it up like so. Okay, come to this side and we're going to do the same thing. Open it up, fold it down. We are folding it to line up with that back panel. Once you know where it needs to be folded, you want to get that corner snipped. And then clip it in place. I am actually going to clip it right at the top there because we're not going to the sewing machine just yet. But that's going to give me a guide to work with. Now we're going to put the next panel on because we really want to get that whole edge folded down to where it needs to be. So again, we're going to work with the front panel now. You want to make sure that your centers are lined up. Just pull that flap out of the way. Make sure your centers are lined up, starting on that bottom long edge, working your way out. Okay. And it should get really close to lining up perfectly. That is pretty good. And we are going to go up the sides now. And you can see that the structure of this bag is just coming together. It is going to be gorgeous. I'm excited to see what it turns out like. Okay. All right, so we're all the way up to the top. You can see that this is looking beautiful. We're gonna pull this flap back out of our way again. And we're going to come to the top here. And again, we want to line up this side with our front main panel. Excuse my cat, he is very needy. But once you get it lined up, then you can get that corner situated and clip off that corner material. Okay. And then clip it to the main panel, like so, to get it to stay. Okay. Do the same thing on this side. If you need to take down that interfacing a little more, don't hesitate to do that. This bag has enough structure in it that it's going to hold. I'm going to fold it over, make sure it meets up. Get my corner trimmed. Clip it together. Okay. So now we have this all clipped together. We're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew around the edges on both sides. Because I have this as stiff as I do, it will be tricky. There will be squishing, there will be moving. Go slow, take your time with it, but we're just going to do a 1/8 inch seam allowance along this entire panel, and that's going to connect it to the frame. And then we're going to come back here, keeping your flap out of the way. We're going to do the same thing, a 1/8 inch seam allowance along this edging, and that's going to pretty much complete the exterior of our bag. Let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, we're back at the sewing machine. And we are going to start. I am actually going to start on the front frame. If I can get this front panel, all these clips off and out of my way, then I can really focus on this, keeping the flap out of the back frame. So I'm going to start that way. My sewing machine has this little front piece that comes off so that I have a little bit more of a narrow area, which works for me. And folding that flap back out of the way, I'm going to start here, 1/8 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the start and the stop. And you just want to go slow, take your time, make sure that your stitch lines are nice and even and smooth. camera a little bit. Coming up the last side for the front. Make sure you backstitch at the end. I'm going to trim our threads down. I'm going to singe the ends of those threads so they're flush. Okay, so the front of our bag is now sewn on, so we're going to do the same thing on the back. Again, you need to be very careful because that back flap is in the way, so you're going to be working around that flap as you go. Coming up the last side. And you're going to burn those threads. Okay. Perfect. Go through, make sure that everything caught and looks good. Okay. All right. So now we're gonna go back to our sewing table and fold in those gusset edges and get our lining ready to sew as well. All right, so we are back at the sewing table. You can see this bag is just looking gorgeous. Now we're gonna come and we are going to fold down our gusset and framing panels. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of double-sided tape, kind of eyeball the measurement here, put that on the very edge. Like that. And then we're just gonna fold it down so it forms this nice line. So frequently I find that my gusset is actually folding right to the gusset like we did for the other panels, and then the framing lines up nicely. I'm just gonna put a clip on those bulky seams to hold it in place. We're gonna flip it over and do the same thing on this other side. Just kind of eyeball the double-sided tape that I need. I'm going to put it on the very edge here of the gusset. This, fold it over, like so, and clip it in place. So yes, you can see that our framing and gusset are two different sizes, but it truly does not matter because when you fold it under, it folds under evenly. So everything comes out evenly on that side and you'll have a nice even line across the top. We're gonna set this aside now. We're gonna work on our lining. I put a pocket in my lining. It's not in the directions, so I'm not gonna go over how to do that. You should have just two plain lining pieces. You're gonna go ahead and line them up right sides together. Clip along the sides. Like so. Clip along the bottom. Oop. And we're gonna go to the sewing machine. Okay, I am going to start stitching with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You want to put it on stitch length, not top stitching length. We're gonna back stitch at the start and stop. And as I work down, I'm actually going to increase my stitch length to 3/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna go from 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. It's a pretty big bite out of it, but I'm trying to get it to fit nice and snug inside. So we're gonna go 1/2 inch, increase it right up to 3/4 of an inch. Like so. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. I'm gonna start with 1/2 of an inch. And I'm gonna increase it right up to 3/4 of an inch. Like so. I'm gonna do 3/4 of an inch here. I wanna do 3/4 of an inch here. Nope, I'm gonna do 1/2 an inch here. I don't think depth needs to be messed up. Then I'm going to trim down these seam allowances. Okay. And I trim down the seam allowances on the side up to the last 1 inch. I leave that alone so I can open them. So I'm going to just go ahead and do this. And do the same on this side, right up to about the last inch or so. And then I leave that alone. Okay. Then, before I go any further, I am going to make my marks on this. So on the lining, we want to make a mark that is 1 inch down. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. But I'm going to make a 1 inch down line from the top edge. Okay. Just like that. And then I'm going to bring these bottom corners in. I'm going to sew these bottom corners with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Or, yeah, I'll start with 3/8 of an inch because we can always increase. Do the same on the other side. And then we are going to trim down these corner seam allowances. And then we're going to go to the sewing table and put this inside our exterior. So to the sewing table. All right. So now we are going to take our lining panel and we are going to fold the top down to meet that 1 inch line. You want to open up your side seams that we left long there so that they can open up nice and flat, and then just go around and fold your seam down to meet that line that we drew. This is going to give us that 1/2 inch fold over. Just kind of clip as you go. Again, once you get to the sides, open up that seam allowance to fold that down. And clip. Clip. Let's clip. Okay. Last part. All right, now we're going to take our bag and we are going to insert the lining into the bag, wrong sides together. Okay, and we're going to start at the centers and we're going to line up our centers and clip. And we're going to go all the way around, but I would definitely start by lining up those front and back centers first. And move to the side. Before we do the side, I like to pull it open, and that bottom corner, I like to have it facing up. So when I put this in, and pull it down so you can see that it's kind of folded up there. Hopefully you can see. Let me see if I can show it. Pull it out a bit. But basically what I'm doing is pushing it in like this. So when it goes in, it's folded up against the side, not against the bottom. So there you can see it's up, and I'm just pushing it down that way while keeping it pointing up. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Make sure those side seams are pointing up. And that just gives it a cleaner look when you're all done. Then we will line up that piece there, and then line up the center on the side. And we're just going around, clipping it in place. That last center. All right, so we have it clipped all the way around. I am going to put a couple extra markers here in the front because I am going to sew around the whole thing except for this very front part here, because I want to leave this open for now for placing the male portion of my turn clasp. And I just still don't have the female in yet. But I do that after I sew the majority of this in. So I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to stitch from here all the way around back to here, leaving this part open. And I'm going to do that at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so we're back at the sewing machine. Here is where it does get a little bit tricky because you've got all of these thicknesses. I am just going to sew. I have that portion of my machine off, so this is more narrow again. And I am just going to sew around like this. But you really got to make sure to keep this back pocket back out of the way as you're going. And this, it gets bulky, but you just go slow and take your time with it. I'm going to leave these threads long so I can pull them back. I don't want to double stitch here and show that stitching on the front. Once you get to these seams on the side, I like to push them towards the side gusset. And I'm just going to work the bag around slowly and carefully. And again, I'm pushing this next seam towards the side gusset. Being very mindful of my flaps because I don't want to sew them in. The lining wants to pull out ahead of the exterior. You really need to keep a tight hold on that exterior to keep them lined up. Get my flap up here out of the way. So that you don't have that pulled up lining. You want to really keep that down in there. down to this next side seam. So I really want to keep it nice and flat. Push the seam towards the side. Making sure all my folds are staying in place. Squishing again. Back around. And then I'm going to leave those threads long. Just make sure that everything caught and it looks nice. All my folds are intact. And that looks great. So I'm just going to knot these threads and then pull it through the seam. But let's go back to the sewing table real quick. All right, so we're back to the sewing table. I'm gonna go ahead and pull these threads back like this. I'm gonna knot them. Like this. Then I'm going to stick my needle into the side seam through the lining only. Connect that thread, pull it through. Clip it off. Do the same thing on this side. I'm going to pull that thread. Knot it. And pull it through the lining. Like this. And cut it. Okay. So now it is sewn around the top except for this opening so that we can add the male portion of our lock. Let me raise this up a bit so you can see how I'm working this next part, because we're going to do the grommets and the female portion, which you can see how this sits. Sits in here really nicely with those sides tucked upwards. You can see that that lining looks really nice in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our turn lock and our grommets. Hammer. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is my female lock. So I'm going to get a ruler, get a marking tool, and I'm going to mark the center of my flap. So I like to get it to where it's going to look when it's closed. So here is what it's going to look like when it's closed. And then I kind of center it in between there. So I go like this with my ruler, and I say that is about 10 inches. So the 5 is about half, and I like to go up 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. So 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. 10 is gonna be right there. And then I just kind of eyeball it, make sure it looks good. That does look nice and center. So I'm going to take the non-pronged portion. I'm going to center that dot in it. And I am going to draw around the edge like that. And I am going to use my hole punch to punch it out. And whoop. Put it on there like this. This goes on here like this. Okay, just make sure that looks nice and centered, like so. Okay. Then I'm going to do my grommets in the top. And so for that, again, I pinch the bag. I come over and I do 3, let's see, I think she did 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to do 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, make a mark like that. I'm going to do 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch here. So I'm going down 1/2 inch from the top, in 1/2 inch from the side, making my marks. Then I'm going to take my grommet and use this as a marking tool. So I'm going to put it here. I want to make sure it's not hitting my stitches on any side. Center that dot, draw a circle, and I know that's what I need to cut out. Do the same thing on this side. Center that dot, make sure it's not hitting any of your stitches. Draw a circle, and that's what you need to cut out. Okay. So, put this down here. I'm gonna cover that right up. Okay. A little bit more. Okay. And we're gonna put these in through the front there. I'm gonna flip this over and align this up with that front piece. Get it flat. And I'm gonna make sure that my vinyl goes down over top put this with the bumpy part or the hill up over my grommet center. Put the grommet tool in place. And set my grommet. Gonna do the same thing on this side. Put this in front. Put this on it, should line up nicely. Hillside up. Like this. Put this on here. Set my grommet. So my grommets are set now. Now I can go ahead and mark the male position of the turn lock because those grommets won't be pulling on it because they're already in place. If you set the male portion before you put the grommets in, those grommets will take up a little bit of that open space and it won't fit just right. So if we put those grommets on first, then we can line this up and mark where it's going. So now that our grommets are in, we're going to kind of shape the corners a bit, get everything nice and lined up, pinch it at the top, bring that flap down, and then we're going to line it up. So it should be nice and pinched up at the top, not too tight, but bring that down. And that is where you're going to be placing your male version. So I'm just going to use my prongs. I'm going to stick this like this and just kind of divot. That's going to give me those indents without having to worry about marking it. So you can see those indents there. That is going to allow me to put this on here and know that that is exactly where it needs to be. Line that up. And again, I'm just going to use indents to show. I'm going to cut through here carefully, just along those slits. Be very careful not to go further. I'll put this guy in. I like to always have that little bit of extra protection on these, and I am going to put a piece of duct tape on the back to prevent the prongs from eating into the lining. So we got this, and we got this. We're gonna open this up. You can see I did not go through the lining, just the exterior and the interfacing. I'm gonna add this little piece of interfacing here, like this. I'm gonna put this washer on, like this. I know this can be a controversial topic, but I tend to push my prongs together in the center like this. I just feel like it's a little more stable that way, a little less likely to pull out. And I'm going to use a piece of duct tape. On the inside here, just to again protect that lining from being rubbed on by the prongs. Then I'm going to fold everything up, make sure that that fits nice. You're happy with the way it looks. And then we are going to go back to the sewing machine and stitch this last opening. Okay. We're in the final stretch here. This is the last stitch line. It should be relatively easy because it's just this front area. Leave long tails so you can pull the threads through without back stitching. Start right in that last thread hole from where you ended stitches. Again, that lining is always wanting to pull up, but don't let it if you can help it. leave long threads. All right, let's go back to the sewing table and finish this. All right, we're back at the sewing table. First thing we're gonna do is take these threads, bring them to the back again, knot them. Like this. Okay, both sides. Okay, and just like before, we want to go through the lining, but not the exterior. Come up through the center. Like that. You can see I'm in the lining, not the exterior. It's coming up through the center. I'm going to thread the thread on, pull it through, do the same thing on this side. Okay. And then we're going to clip these down. Like that. Can't even tell now. I'm going to close this up. Oh, it looks so pretty. Now we're going to finish this off with the handle. You should have your handle piece still. I am using these spring rings like this, but you can use the lobster claw or whatever you have on hand, really. I just prefer these for this particular type of handle attachment. I am going to put my spring strap circle in, fold it over, and I want to make sure that it's an inch folded over, so that is about an inch. And then I'm going to do 1/2 inch in, because that's half of my handle. My handle is 1 inch length. I'm going to do 1/2 inch in, and I'm going to do 3/8 inch up, and I'm going to mark that. I'm going to do just this side, the little tab side, like this. So you can see I didn't go through all of it, just the one side. And that is so I can really get a nice snug fit. So I'm going to fold this back over, make sure it's nice and flat, and then I'm going to mark underneath and punch there. And then I'm going to press a rivet in place. Okay. Put that in place, press it. Okay. And that gives you a nice lock on that. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So put this on. I'm gonna make sure it's about an inch folded, and it's really important to have that ring on there when you're measuring, because that ring eats up space. If you were to measure an inch without it, it would not be the same. So make sure you put that ring or lobster claw or whatever it is on it before you measure. That is about an inch. So I'm going to set this down. I'm going to go 1/2 inch in, because my strap is 1 inch thick, and 3/8 of an inch up. Mark it. Going to punch that hole. Okay, really make sure that's nice and flat and snug. before I mark down below through the hole. Punch that. Get a rivet. There we go. Press that rivet in place. Nice. Okay, move this stuff. Then we attach this to our bag with the spring lock. It's pretty simple. You just roll it in like that, and then you can hide that spring lock portion under this handle seam, so it looks seamless, which is pretty amazing. And you can do the same thing on this side. Pull this through. Like this. Hide that spring in the handle seam, and you have your handle attached. I made a strap, but if you have your chain, you can add the chain to the D-rings on the side. And if you have any bling that you wanted to add, you can add that, as well. But apparently I need to fix this before I add this. So, and your bag is done. Good job on sticking with me. I hope that I did this tutorial all right. It's an awesome pattern. This is an awesome vinyl. Again, this is Shaq's Crafts vinyl, and I really love this black. It's so nice to work with. And this pattern is so perfect for this structured, nice, firm bag. It's awesome. So thank you for an awesome pattern, Obi, and I hope this helped.